Hello, everyone. Dean Rock here. Welcome back to the Gaago, the analysis show. Joining me again this week is Aaron Kernan. Lots to mull over and lots of talking points from the weekend's games. Some great games of football. Aaron, how'd you get on in Killarney?
Yeah, great trip down. I suppose the sunshine whenever we arrived added to the sense of occasion. Game lived up to the billing for the vast majority, and as always, the social scene in Killarney was as good as it can be expected.
Yeah, so a sore head on Sunday morning, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was a
Come
grim
here,
play home, but anyway.
obviously some great games the weekend. It probably felt like the real start of the championship, and obviously Saturday night started with obviously Kerry and Cork, but then the real talking point was that Donegal and Derry game up in Celtic Park, and a lot of the talk was around Oran Lynch and the Derry press and the kickouts. But I know from speaking to myself and yourself are very much on the same wavelength that it's probably just a few tweaks here and there for Derry as opposed to ripping up the script on it and going back with a totally different game plan. I think what's worked for them throughout the league in the last couple of years in terms of their kick-out strategy will continue to work for them. They just need to tweak one or two things.
Yeah, to be fair, like at the weekend, they're going into that game as raging hot favourites. I'm sure they weren't foolish enough to think that Jimmy McGuinness could pull a surprise out of the hat or hone in on something that could cause them problems. But you have to give them huge credit. They've won back-to-back Ulster titles. They've then pushed on this year, won the National League. They're developing their panel, their style of player throughout. But as we look through these clips here, I don't know, it couldn't possibly be naivety given the management team and the experience that the players had. But it's fair to say that they definitely didn't cope or didn't adjust with the tactic that Donegal had come to try and punish them with. And I would say even in McGuinness's wildest dreams, he never envisaged that it would last for 70 minutes. I think he might have thought, we'll go after something for a certain period of time, they'll adjust and they'll switch. But the fact that they were able to do it from basically the first kick out to the last kick out to the game, I think it just seemed like it spread a bit of panic throughout the whole way throughout the Derry team, which is something that has been so unusual for them this past 3 years.
Yeah, and I think Donegal set their intention quite early on in terms of we're going to look to target Oran Lynch on the kickouts and maybe kick it to his side. And naturally enough, when a keeper does come up into the line for kickouts, it is a good idea to put the ball on his head to ask questions of him. You'll see him here. He's kind of biting in a little bit. The ball eventually comes to Donegal man. He doesn't really fully engage on it, and only for a poor kick. Donegal are potentially in for a goal from the very first kick out. Again, Oran Lynch is really, really high up here. Like just on the analysis side of it, like Oran, he's just too high up. Like Sean Patton has got the longest kick in the game, and the trajectory of that, it gets to where it needs to get to quite quickly. So you don't have time to shift across as much as you possibly can. They don't win this one, but again, it just reiterates the point that we're targeting this kick out. We're looking to get flick-ons and we're looking to get goals. Just on this one here, this is actually where the first goal comes from. When you do miss a shot, there's a different sort of energy. There's not as much communication. You can see here, again, Oran Lynch is a little bit too high up, 65. If it was me the next day, I would imagine that he'd be 10 metres further back. Again, here, you'll just see here now, so you've Donegal have 4 players inside the 45. Derry have 8. The Donegal players out around the midfield area, the Derry 65, are in an advantageous position to win that break. They've got the run on their men. The 2 Derry guys who are sitting on top of the 45 are doing nothing because the 2 guys just right behind them could have pushed those 2 guys on to be there for the break and ball. Ultimately, it's quite clever from Donegal. They manipulate Derry in a very good way. They have the numbers around the break. Of course, it's a lottery when that ball breaks at times, but if you've got more numbers there, you have a better chance of winning it. And that's just what happened there. They picked up the breaking ball. It was 6'2", and again, they get the goal from it. On this one here, just on the keeper's body language itself, it's quite clear where Sean Patton is going here. He's going across his body and he's kicking that over to his left. But Derry, again, they're just too naive. They're not reading the situation. It's not as wide a pitch in Celtic Park to Croke Park as well, so they would have time to shift across, but the response is just too slow. And you can see just with Sean Patton in particular, his trajectory of the ball is so low that if defenders in the full forward line are behind their men, it's going to enable the Donegal guys to get flick-ons and tap-ons. So you've got to be marking that from slightly in front. Again, here from Derry, it's poor communication. There's two jumpers. And it's just not shifting back quick enough for Moran Lynch and the other Derry players. But again, it's something that is easily fixed. It's just a spacing thing. It's a positioning thing. And they will be far better for the next day. Again, this one, they ask a question of Moran Lynch. They put the ball on top of his side. He doesn't engage. He doesn't go for it. Donegal win the ball and they're on the ascendancy. They're driving forward. And this time just shows the danger of when Oran Lynch and a keeper in general actually commits to a kick out and goes to try and win the ball. And if he doesn't win this ball, the danger it represents. So again, it's probably not the cleanest kick, but it comes off. Oran Lynch gambles, he goes for it, doesn't win it. And they're totally exposed, and it's 3v2. It's dreamland stuff for Donegal, and it's three goals off the kickouts. And look, I'm sure the Donegal management team, everything that they worked on and planned for came to fruition, and the way Derry thought that they would be able to deal with it obviously didn't. But I know you've your opinion on it, but I don't see Derry changing much the next day. Just their spacing has to be an awful lot better. The guys who are doing nothing in the full forward line need to be drifting out to obviously be around for the breaking ball and the numerical advantage.
Yeah, the big one is, to be fair to Donegal, they had identified something that they were going after, and a lot of the chat now is, I'm sure, it was the most obvious thing, and it's simplistic. But do you see how many runners they have coming on the break? But see that first hand pass? It's basic, but it's slick. It's going forward, and then there's a flood of them running. Like that first goal, you think back to it again. Like Whale has two options on his left-hand side. Ray McHugh, can't think of the other person. And you can tell from a long way out, they're not getting that ball, but they keep going. In the off chance this bobbles, or he needs help, he needs support. This is something that they clearly worked on, clearly identified, and they were looking to put fear into Derry to try and get them to adjust. From a Derry perspective, there's so much that they can improve on. For me, I don't know. Like, Lynch is a big man. He can come out. He fills a big gap. He looks like a big presence to try and, coerce you to go the opposite side, which is potentially what they're looking to do. But I'm not so sure I would be putting him back into that situation again. That far out the field. I know what you're saying in terms of their space, and Patton's kick out, like you're talking 2 steps there, but it's you're right. It's how the speed it goes at, but how low it gets there. Like there's no hanging on his kickouts. Like the thump that comes off them once you hear them live, it's incredible. So not many teams will be able to punish them in that format, but how they set up, how they had 8 men inside of 45 chasing 4 or 5 Donegal men, that's like you have to sit back as a Derry group of players, management, you have to accept that's not acceptable in a game of that magnitude or that importance. I don't know how they get drawn into those situations. All marking too high up the field and not reading how long the kicks were going is another clear example. But one that is a really quick fix is Chrissy McCaig. Now, to be fair, he has a tendency where he turns his back to the play and just is an obsession with marking his own man. He can't see what's happening behind him. Had he been side on and seen the danger that was coming, you communicate with Oran Lynch, you tell him to pick up Gallen, he goes on the lane, and you give away a point. Giving away a point in that situation is much better, obviously, than give away a goal, because it's not only the 3 points, it's just a bit of panic it sets through you. It was the chaos that it was creating. It's then your own crowd starts to grow and a bit of doubt starts to come into you. And it just seemed like it went from bad to worse for them throughout the day.
And even on the second goal, just after half time, the Darrell Wheel goal, like the objective of having Oran Lynch on the far side to force the keeper to kick the other side of the pitch, it went well for Derry in that sense. It was a 3-on-2 to Derry's favour.
Yeah.
It just so happened that the Derry guys were pushed up that little bit too far up to allow that kick over their heads, and there was 2 jumpers I don't think there's much danger there that if the Derry guy who decides to jump with the other defender stays on the ground and ends up tagging Darrell Wheel, there's not a goal that happens there. So that's what I mean.
No, yeah. So someone's goal side, you
Yeah,
slow up the play, you wait for Lynch to get back. 2-3 seconds is all it needs.
that's all it is. And they might get a point, but they won't get a goal.
Yeah, and to be fair, even though Donegal went after this tactic, like there was a fair degree of luck in particularly the three that they got from open play, like that break ball in the middle of the field. I've been a halfback coming on the balls like that. Sometimes it literally just bounces perfectly in front of you. You break a tackle and it's open ground. The other two in the second half then as well. It's break balls that just happen to land to their favour and they're gone. But you're right. Again, that second goal was a bit of communication. It was reading a situation where you never have two of your own players going for the one ball. One man stays down. If the Donegal player had won it at that stage and he hits the ground, just get him wrapped up. Or make sure that next pass goes back. That's it. And it gives Lynch that chance.
And the problem was then that when they found themselves so far behind that they couldn't really say, you know what, we're actually going to push back a little bit now. They had to continue with the press because they're chasing the game. So it wasn't a case of, look, we're only 1 or 2 points down here. We need to just tweak things. They kind of nearly had to continue to force the issue. Now, the only thing going forward for Derry is they're not going to come up against a Sean Patton every week.
Yeah.
So there's not as many good goalkeepers around as him. I've played against him, and he is the best at getting that ball up as fast as possible. So if Derby are playing Donegal again, I know you understand that you can get a lot of scores from if you turn over the keeper's kickouts, but sometimes you just have to minimise one of Donegal's greatest threats, and that is Sean Patton and his kickouts. So the next day, do Derry drop guys outside the 45, go against a little bit of what they're trying to do, but ultimately they're just adapting to what is the key strength of Donegal in terms of those long kickouts and looking to get goals. So they might be a case of the full forward line might drop out, leave those Donegal guys in, like the clips we've seen, leave them in there. If Patton wants to go short, well, that's fine. He can go short. Then Derry can get a press. The transition's a little bit slower, and they don't get the opportunity to get in on goal and get the goal chances that they created last Saturday. So there is a lot of things that that Derry could do if they happen to come up against Donegal the next day, and for other teams coming up against Donegal. Because if I was coming up against Patton, I don't think at certain times you'll press and squeeze him, but there's certain times where you're just going to have to sit back and allow them to win it short and then get your press on after that.
Yeah, to be fair, your Dublin team had it mastered. Limerick Hurlers, our team, they're excellent at the minute, where they're pressing you, but as soon as the ball goes over the full back lane or the full forward lane, everybody sprints to drop a lane. Like the amount of times you'd see the likes of yourself and Con where you're standing in the full forward lane, but you know what you're trying to do. You're condensing the whole pitch and getting as many people in on that break as you can. And if you win it, then it leaves you open ground to run into. So I think just a simple mindset again. And Kerry or Derry potentially just got caught cold at the weekend. I'm not sure they really seen coming, or they really believed that Donegal had with a tuck to beat them. And whenever your mindset is off just a slight bit, where you have a team that is so well prepared, like it all had been spoken about, and I mentioned it myself last week, McGuinness is such a deep thinker of the game. I would say plotting and planning throughout the National League was probably minimum to him. He had one game in mind to kick off their year for 2024, and that was it. That was his statement of intent. And if you look from his point of view now, and how many times have you seen the previous Donegal team he played with, he says so many things that he gets the players believing, but when it comes off, it's incredible what it can do for the belief on him, on their group, and their belief in him in terms of how right he is. So yeah, it was an unbelievable start to the Ulster campaign for them. But yeah, as you had mentioned, I was only watching that one from TV down in Killarney. I was at the big one in Cork and Killarney, Cork and Kerry down in Killarney, and to be fair, the first half in terms of the pace that they played at, the I suppose Cork, you'd have to give so much credit in how well they played, their running power for the first 25, 30 minutes. They were hugely impressive. But I would say Kerry caught on, Kerry adapted. We look at some clips in terms of how that there worked out. But to be fair to them, they turned it around, they won the game, they cut out goal chances. But I think the big thing that they can take learnings from is football has changed an awful lot this past few months, even in particular, in terms of teams are offering you up the opportunity to want to play front foot football. Cork went man to man early on, but I noticed it the other day, and we've looked back over it again, and it was right what I was watching. The amount of time and space that Cork afforded to David Clifford was incredible. Not something that you see every day. Right. But it was actually happening whenever they were at their peak, they were at their best. So it's not the greatest of angle here, but it's behind the goal shot. This is Clifford on the far end of the field. He leads in towards the full forward line and doubles back. If that's a neat 25, 30 meter pop pass in front of him, he's just coming running onto that ball. He can take you on either side and he'd have options coming off him. You'll see quite a trend in quite a lot of these that it's unusual. I don't know whether the players themselves were surprised by what they've seen. This one here again, it's at his ankles.
Three bouncing. Yeah.
Exactly. Like all you want is it bouncing into his chest. If that bounces in his chest, he doesn't need to slow down. The runner is off his shoulder and it's timed right where it is at his ankles. Whoever was past him is gone off his shoulder. This one here, now, in fairness, he was a bit jittery, he was a bit fumbly at times the other day, which again isn't like him. But the runners are gone past him that bit sooner, because I think you'll see in this instance, he's starting his runs that bit further out. I think an awful lot of times, an awful lot of opportunities, he could have went further to the end line. The further he went in, the more space he was leaving for himself for that pop pass in front of him. And it allows his runners, his halfbacks, half forwards to time the run that bit better off a shoulder, or it simply allows him a one-on-one situation where he can turn and put it into the net. This was the last one of the first half, and to be fair, he's on the half turn, he's spinning, he has in his head, I'm going to take Daniel O'Mahony on the outside here, and O'Mahony did an unbelievable job in him. The management put faith in him, he delivered, he was excellent. He didn't really have any notions or intentions of heading the other end of the field. He was there to do a job. I'm not sure Kerry fully exploited it, as you can see from those clips, but I think it is definitely something that they as a management team and as a playing group will pick up on, and it's something that I'm sure, as you know yourself, you communicate whenever you're on the field that bit better. If the space is on, he may not get that space between now and an All-Ireland semi-final or an All-Ireland final, depending if it's your dubs are going to give him that one-on-one. But if that does happen again, there clearly is huge room for improvement in where he positions himself, but also the quality of ball that he gets whenever a Kerry man is in position in around your 65, 45 metre line.
Yeah, because look, I suppose the game probably started off quite ropey for Kerry in terms of conceding an early goal, and look, I'm sure Cork was obviously part of the game plan to come up and start well and get into a lead at halftime, which they managed to do, but just obviously we'll talk about it later, that they couldn't really hang on. Maybe it was a little bit of fitness, or just that playing at Division 1 maybe compared to Division 2 at times you can see the difference in it. But yeah, I think from Kerry's perspective, they built up a huge reputation the year they won the All-Ireland in terms of not conceding many goals. I think they went through the whole year one year in terms of not conceding any goals in the championship, and Tyg Morley was a massive part of that in terms of being that +1 in front of goal and minding the house. Now, because Jason Foley is now injured, he's now been given a man marking role. He had to go in and mark Brian Hurley the next day, so they don't really have a designated guy. I'm sure they do on the pitch, but they haven't really got a guy who might be as comfortable in that +1 position as he would have been, and he was. So with the first goal that Cork got, there's a complete, I suppose, guys are too focused on their own men. Like again, the Cork are transition down the wing. That's fine. There's no real danger here. There's a good cut from the sideline, from the wing forward coming in off the sideline. But you can just see in the top of the D, Kerry's fullback's too preoccupied with his own man. Again, there's no one tracking any of the runners from deep. They're all pretty much ball watching or minding their own men, which at this level is just not good enough from a team defensive perspective, and cork it in and they get a goal. Now, to credit Kerry, they made sure that this wasn't going to happen again. So whether that was a call from the players on the pitch or from the management team, but you can clearly see in this instance, Diarmuid O'Connor is coming back to release Paul Murphy to get across and help Tadhg Morley to cut down the goal threat. It enables to get a double up. Hurley does really, really well to get a score out of it, but Kerry just take away the goal chance from a little bit better communication between Diarmuid O'Connor and releasing Paul Murphy to get across to help Morley. Again, in this example, there's just a consciousness around it in terms of where is the danger, and that's in a lot of examples it was Diarmuid O'Connor. So you can see there's no runners coming from deep, and then you can see he's just making a beeline for the fullback, the box three position, and to try and stop that ball from going in there and being a threat of a goal. Again, Cork transition down the pitch, everything going down to the wing, but this time you can see Joe O'Connor in this example. He's flooding back into that area. So there is a consciousness around, right, we need to protect the centre channel. There can't be any goals here. And in this example, he actually gets across, gets a bit of pressure on the kick. The ball goes wide. So there was an obvious change to where Kerry were from that first one or two plays with Cork. And then they made changes probably after 15 minutes where you really started to see them really tighten up around that area. They probably knew that they'd get enough scores to beat Cork. It was just the ability to maybe nullify them getting another goal, which ultimately would have kept Cork in the game. But they did make that tweak, in fairness to them. But going forward, it's just if Diarmuid O'Connor or Joe O'Connor are preoccupied with good midfielders, will they have that ability to cheat off that little bit to get back into that position? It's hard to know. So a lot will depend on Jason Foley potentially coming back to free up Tadhg Morley to do that, because I think he's best suited to do that for the team.
Yeah, to be fair, maybe where there's a bit of a mindset thing with Kerry as well. I'm not sure they envisaged the level, I suppose, of drive and pace that from the throw-in Cork, everyone just went. You know, they might have been talking an awful lot of, is Powder going to come back and sit as a +1 in front of Clifford? You know, that'll offer them up a centre-half. Powder didn't come back at all until maybe the 30th minute of the game. So it meant that every Kerry defender had to pick up a man. And just like I mentioned, that's a mindset thing where you're expecting something and it doesn't happen. They didn't adapt very quickly. Now, 15 minutes into the game, they're clearly, whether it come from the players in the field or whether it come from the sideline, there absolutely was a change in how Kerry were defending. First 15 minutes, every time you were thinking one more pass here and this could end up with a goal chance. And you could, again, I had a perfect vantage point from where we were in commentary. Every Kerry defender, bar whoever was in the inside lane, was usually Tadhg Morley nearly in a one-on-one, was running back towards his own goal. So the call came where Diarmuid O'Connor, or in lesser circumstances, Joe O'Connor, just got themselves to a central position, scanned the field to see where's the danger, where's the runners coming from. Do I need to go over and double up here and leave maybe a point opportunity slightly further out? So definitely they were much better in how they defended, how they cut down the space, how they helped each other. And you're right, everything is based around Morley, who communicates really well, and he's a calm presence and he's comfortable on the ball. Him then having to go into that inside lane, like he probably ends up man marking a wee bit more than what he probably would like to do. Number one, because he's not used to it, but number two, you're just in a wee bit more of a high pressure situation than what it is whenever you're floating around trying to sense danger yourself. So yeah, if Jason Foley does come back, then obviously that will free up him to go back to 6 and give them that bit more shape. And then, to be honest with you, most teams that they will come up against until maybe a semi-final or final will always put a +1 back in front of David Clifford. So we will just automatically, it doesn't offer them up a sweeper, it just leaves them with a centre-half back who's free and can read the play and make sure that he cuts out the goal threat that they have coming past them. So it was something that I'd say took them a wee bit by surprise, and just the pace and the power that Cork came with. But to be fair to them, once they adapted to it, I thought that they were fairly comfortable. There was no real sense of danger, even throughout the whole second half, that there was the possibility that they were going to be sliced open or there was no goal danger there at all. Yeah,
and look, probably coming down the stretch, we touched on it in terms of Cork's ability to maybe push on and press on and really try and take the game to Kerry and get the necessary scores laid on to force maybe a draw and extra time. But there was a passage of play at the very end of the game where Kerry held the ball for the guts of 5 minutes. I'm sure there was probably roars coming in from the Cork sideline and the supporters in terms of trying to push up, and I suppose we'll talk about it, but it's just more around like what their intentions and what they're trying to do is quite good. It's just the length of time in which they did it for is the real issue. Like there's still there's 67 minutes gone in the game. If Cork get a turnover by the 68th minute, there's still plenty of time on the clock to get the scores back. But essentially, like you touched on it with Rory Dean coming back as the +1, but he doesn't ever really press out at any stage to try and get that double up or to try and force a turnover. It seems that Cork are quite content just to allow the time to go. And like I've been in this position where like Roscommon did this to us last year, and it can be very, very difficult, particularly when it's a hot day, and not to mention when it's after 70 odd minutes of championship football being played. It is very hard to get the ball back. But the only way you can get the ball back is through doing that in a very much coordinated fashion. It doesn't really seem that the Cork players are doing anything coordinated in this sense. It just seems that a lot of guys are chasing the ball left and right. The guys up the top end of the pitch are doing all the work, but they're not getting any closer to getting a turnover. So somebody from the back here needs to be pushing guys out to try and get that turnover, but it just doesn't come. But we would have learned a huge amount from what Roscommon did to us in that scenario, because we probably weren't exposed to that much, or particularly for that long. So I'm sure Cork will come away from this and identify the times of where, okay, this is where we potentially could have pressed out or got a double up. They will take a lot of learning from it, because naturally enough, I think Cork are going to be quite competitive in the championship, and they will find themselves going down the stretch in games where it is quite close.
Like they'll be annoyed with themselves in terms of, we flip back to the clips that we spoke about Clifford. That was the first half. That was 20-25 minutes. Whenever, granted, they're fresher, but you're still leaving a fresh David Clifford in 1-on-1, and they back themselves to do it. In this instance, whether it is a case of fatigue kicking in, but you're right. If you just look at an awful lot of what they're doing here at this stage, there's no coordination. At times there, you see a Cork player running past two Cork players to try and put in a tackle. They're not pushing a man out to it. It's like me starting in the 6th position, heading out towards the sideline. Don't run past two people. Just push the next Cork player you have on to the next Kerry player, and then push the next man on. They were trying, like bar one, vast majority it was Dean. Sometimes you can see in the clip Daniel O'Mahony maybe ended up free, depending on where the movement was. But everyone else in the Cork jersey, they actually don't stop running. They're chasing men from one side of the field to the other. But you're right, there wasn't much constructive work in terms of what they were doing. They were chasing their tails. So again, it is definitely something that they will learn in terms of potentially passing players on, that you're not running past a Cork player to get another tackle on. Or after a minute or two, if you don't want to be overly cynical about the whole thing, but just get the game stopped.
Yeah.
Somebody make that clumsy tackle to do what you can do to get the game stopped, that everyone can push out and get man to man and leave it that they only... Now, to be fair to Kerry, they were very good at not really taking it into contact. The chance their arm, they'd go a certain bit, and as soon as they felt like I'm closing in on the sideline or second man's coming in, they always had, it was either Paddy Clifford, Tom O'Sullivan, or if they're really stuck, Shane Ryan out the back, or they're going back to them in the middle of the field. So they were cute about what they did. They didn't take it into a huge amount of contact, but it's absolutely something that Cork and a lot of teams can learn from.
It's like the shift has to come from the far side. So naturally enough, if the ball is over one wing, the Cork guys have got to be shifting across.
Yeah.
Just shifting across into the middle, maybe pushing out and leaving the 3 or 4 Kerry guys that are on the wing and make them null and void essentially, and try and develop and try and get an extra man that way. Whereas the Cork guys just seemed to stay with the Kerry men out wide, and they didn't really help themselves. So like going forward, if they could just squeeze and maybe push another guy on and potentially get that turnover, Because
yeah, so if you're imagining the field in 3 zones like everyone really does now, Cork played them in 3 zones for almost 5 minutes. Where at no stage did they bring it into 2, where you're playing them in the central channel and the far side line. And ultimately, once in the whole thing, a Kerry player kicked it from one side of the field off the outside of his boot to the far side.
But they're very rarely going to kick it, like.
Yeah, and even at that, the ball's in the air, you're able to get across and cover that. It was 45 metres out. There was no point on, there was no goal on, there was no danger in that situation. So, yeah, there's huge amount that they can pick up, they can learn from. And to be honest with you, I'd say, as you learned last year against Roscommon, there's a whole load of teams, whenever you're ticking off this what-if list that you are very good at in Jim Gavin's Dublin, it's another box that everyone can tick in terms of if this happens to us, coming down the closing straight, this is what we could do better. So, all in all, other than that, it was a good and entertaining day out in Killarney.
You can see already to start the championship, there is a lot of talking points starting to appear. There is a lot of trends starting to appear in terms of how teams are starting to play, and naturally enough, it's leaving clues for a lot of other people to see what they can do to counteract it. They're starting to get an idea of what particular teams are starting to do in the championship. So there is trends developing, and then it's up to obviously the likes of Jim McGuinness and Donegal now to recalibrate things and come up with something different, because naturally enough, the oppositions now to Tyrone this weekend are going to look to counteract it. But it leaves for an intriguing couple of weeks anyway, and no doubt we'll have plenty more analysis to mull over for next week. So we'll leave it there, Aaron, and thanks again for joining, and I'm sure Noel Connors will have plenty of hurling insight later on the week too. All right, take care, guys.
Cheers, team.